Hello, everybody. This is my favorite part as we just get ready to gather and I watch that participant number creep up. Thank you guys so much for registering for this session. This is fantastic. As you roll in, I will say welcome back to all our returning audience members. A happy hello to our first timers, and a wink and a nod to those of you who are listening on the recording. I see you, I really do. Welcome to Skeptical Inquirer Presents. This is a series, as you know, of live online presentations from experts who are devoted to advancing science over pseudoscience, media literacy over conspiracy theories, and critical thinking over magical thinking. My name is Leanne Lord. I am a stand-up comedian, author, and co-host of Point of Inquiry, which you can hear wherever you get your podcasts, as it is the podcast for the Center for Inquiry. If you're not already, by the way, you guys, let me remind you to treat yourself to a subscription to Skeptical Inquirer magazine, although I'm sure all of you are already subscribed. And be sure to check out CFI's Coronavirus Resource Center, which you can find at centerforinquiry.org/coronavirus. And if you are so inclined and want to find out just a little bit more about me and my work, you can do so at veryfunnylady.com. I will let you know, of course you guys know this, it is October, so I wish you a very happy Family History Month. It is also National Sarcasm Awareness Month. Whatever. And it is also Teller Appreciation Week. And I know, right? What's a teller? Today is Stardate Thursday, October 8th, 2020, the year of our crazy CE. And we celebrate the birthdays of science fiction author Frank Herbert, rapper CL Smooth, and yes, all the honey dips do indeed still admire, and actor Matt Damon, who said that I think what's important for kids to know is that your decisions here on Earth matter. Your behavior matters, and how you treat other people matters. We also acknowledge the passing in 1869 of Franklin Pierce, the 14th President of the United States, and in 1793, the winner of the Best Handwriting Ever Award, John Hancock. Now, I am pointing out these birthdays and death dates because tonight's Skeptical Inquirer Presents will be a conversation about rituals for non-believers, how we can creatively acknowledge the passage of time. Our guest this evening is a native of Ithaca, New York, and a graduate of New York University. She has worked as a writer, a television producer, a filmmaker, and an editor in New York City, in Boston, and in London. Her essays and interviews on death, history, travel, and ritual through the scientific lens have appeared in New York Magazine, the Oprah Magazine, Literary Hub, Mashable.com, and so many others. And she is, of course, the author of For Small Creatures Such as We. I might have perused it just a bit, you guys. And I do hope one day when we are both in the same city that I can become a member of her Ladies Dining Society. But we'll talk about that when we get to monthly rituals. But from the comfort of your homes and couches and cars, please welcome Sasha Sagan.
Thank you so much, Leanne. That's so lovely. And yes, absolutely. You must join the Ladies Dining Society when we get to the moment when we can all be together in person again. But in the meantime, it's so lovely to be with you here through the magic of technology and science.
Thank you, Sasha. Thank you. I think we wanted to open up. Because I'm not sure how many people are familiar with your book, have read your book, but if we could just give them a little taste, and
Sure.
then we can chat.
Yeah, I'll read you just a tiny bit from the introduction to give some background, and then we can sort of jump in. So if a person is interested in testing their preconceptions, in discovering how things really are and why, how does one go about that? My parents taught me that the scientific method is designed for precisely this job. My father was a scientist. He was the astronomer and educator Carl Sagan. Science wasn't just his occupation, it was the source of his worldview, his philosophy, his guiding principles. He and my mom, writer-producer Ann Druyan, taught me that belief requires evidence. They taught me that science wasn't just a set of facts to be compared and contrasted with other philosophies, but a way of testing ideas to see which ones can stand up to scrutiny. They taught me that what scientists think today might be disproven tomorrow. And that's wonderful, because that's the pathway to a better, deeper understanding. This left me with something of a conundrum when my dad died. I had just turned 14, longed to see him again somehow. I would often dream of being reunited with him. In these dreams, I would receive an elaborate explanation about where he'd been. Usually a misunderstanding or some kind of secret mission was to blame. The dreams would all end the same way. Elated, I'd tell him, I knew it. I knew you weren't really dead. I have these dreams all the time where you come back. And as I'd say those words, a sorrowful look would cross his face, and I would realize, this is one of those dreams, isn't it? He would nod apologetically, and I would awaken. Still now, more than 2 decades later, I sometimes have those dreams. Everything he taught me, everything he stood for, keeps me from believing that I will be reunited with him again. But our secular home was not cynical. Being alive was presented to me as profoundly beautiful and staggeringly unlikely, a sacred miracle of random chance. My parents taught me that the universe is enormous and we humans are tiny beings who get to live on an out-of-the-way planet for the blink of an eye. And they taught me that, as they once wrote, for small creatures such as we, the vastness is bearable only through love. That's a line that appears in the novel Contact, the only work of fiction my dad ever published. He and my mom had first envisioned it as a movie, but movies take a very long time to make. This one in particular took about 18 years from conception to premiere. During those years, my parents decided to try the story out as a novel, which they dedicated to me. As with everything they wrote, Contact was a collaboration. Though that line is attributed to my dad, it's my mom who actually came up with those words, which have served as a perfect crystallization of our family philosophy. Growing up in our home, there was no conflict between science and spirituality. My parents taught me that nature, as revealed by science, was a source of great stirring pleasure. Logic, evidence, and proof did not detract from the feeling that something was transcendent. Quite the opposite. It was the source of its magnificence.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And this is where I have to be honest. I acknowledge the limitations of this medium. You know, we are in webinar mode, and if we weren't, this is where we would insert thunderous applause.
That's okay.
For you,
Thank
for
you.
you sharing that. Thank you so much. There was something that I read in your introduction that I really love. But first, let me say, I think it's so astounding and fascinating that your parents didn't lie to you. I think for most of us, misinformation begins at home.
Sure, and it's I now have a 3-year-old, and I understand some things are very awkward and uncomfortable and upsetting, and I totally get it. But I really feel such gratitude to my parents that they treated me with the respect of assuming that I could handle even very difficult ideas.
Yeah, I wish. I've learned so much the hard way. But you said something in the introduction, and I'll try and quote it here, that we humans have been celebrating the same 2 things since the dawn of time: astronomy and biology. And that's how the 16 chapters of your book break down. You know, there's astronomy. I'm just looking at my notes here. Astronomy, which is, the seasons, the daily, weekly, and monthly rituals, and our annual ones, like birthdays and anniversaries. Biology, the birth and coming of age and death. And I want to come back to that. But I want to say that there were a couple of chapters that surprised me that you included: Confession and Atonement. feast and fast, and Independence Days. And I wanted to ask, can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
more about those and like what made you think to include those in, and how can they be rituals for secular people?
So I'm really interested in, I mean, I think so much of ritual is about patterns. We love
Right.
patterns as human beings. You know what I mean? I think the reason that we have, as you said, so much around the world, disparate cultures who have had no contact, so many of their observances, traditions, rites of passage, holidays fall at the same points in the calendar. And our calendars change, and there's all sorts of reasons over the millennia that a particular holiday may get moved a few days here and there. But when we look at the roots of so much of what we do, it's really about the equinoxes and the solstices and about the changes in our bodies, as you said. And it's amazing when you sort of peel off the specifics of time and place, what you can find that is so similar and that is based on something that is really happening. And that's what I find so like joyful and wonderful, that we have been sort of celebrating the scientific all along. And then those other chapters that I tried to weave together. I mean, feast and fast, that's also part of nature. That's also biology. We have so many harvest festivals around the world where a plant is sort of the belle of the ball because it bears so much of the weight, or historically bared so much of the weight of sustaining a community. And, we evolved in situations where we didn't know if we were going to get through the winter. It wasn't that it was a fast because we were atoning or something like that. It was because there were just times when there wasn't food or very little food. And I think that pattern, that experience has carried through even to those of us who are lucky to, always have access to the grocery store, or have this, have fruit all season, all year long that we would have had for a couple of weeks, traditionally. And I think that also links to this amazing biological connection of, plants grow in the earth. They get sun, they get water, they get light from our star, they get water, they get the nutrients from the earth. And, it's something that you learn when you're so little that it's hard to see it as astonishing. But if you took a step back and you think, we put this stuff that grows in the earth in our bodies and it allows us to live, it's amazing. And so with that, I think there is something that really does fall into the biological category. But with the Confession and Atonement and the Independence Days, what I try to do is draw a connection between the way that questioning ourselves, questioning the status quo, correcting our wrongs, trying to see a path forward that's better, does fall in line. And listen, sometimes we are horrible at it as human beings. It's really hard, right? It's really hard to say I was wrong. It's really hard to say we've believed X for thousands of years and now we're just staring proof that that's not true in the face. So we're going to just let that go. That stuff is so tough to do. But I think there is a connection between that kind of ritual, or there could be a connection between that kind of ritual of atonement, of confession, of coming to reckon with our shortcomings, and Independence Days, which are about, things are the way they are. They don't have to be that way. Why is this system in place? That does fall in line with elements of how science moves forward. And it's not a perfect correlation, but I just thought, what if we, found ways to, if our values as secular people are about evidence-based information and about following, the evidence where it leads, what if we sort of found ways to confess and atone when we've been wrong, when we had misinformed, someone about something we thought was true and found out it wasn't true, or just all the little, household, domestic, family things that we all go through where we think, oh, I could have been like not so, difficult about this or whatever it is, but just to sort of normalize that idea of we're all wrong sometimes. And
Me too.
Yeah, not you. No, man, not you. No. But like everyone else. But I think that there's something really valuable about making that normal. And, my parents would always taught me, what's so wonderful about science is that you're a better scientist if you totally overturn the status quo and you disprove everything that your, let's say, your forefathers, your professors, the people who you learned from, and foremothers taught you, that's a credit to you. You know what I mean? That's something that is really worthy of celebration. And what if we kind of found ways to bring that value into other parts of our life, where when we break with tradition for something better, it's valuable and worthy of celebration.
Yeah, I remember reading that chapter about confession and atonement, and I almost had a knee-jerk resistance to it because I was raised Catholic, and I didn't understand the whole confessional thing. Like, why am I talking to this dude? Like this seems really unreasonable. But you said it in the book so beautifully that this needn't be a day to beat ourselves up for being human, but recognizing that we've made a mistake, acknowledging it, trying to make amends, because we can't improve ourselves if we can't acknowledge where we've floundered and atone.
And I think that, the things that we consider sins, in quotes, like, I don't think that the stuff that is taught in Catholicism is the stuff that we ought to be ashamed of. I think it's, but we all do things that are not awesome sometimes. And I think it's a question, not you, Anne, but it's like a question of, okay, well, if it's not, let's say, about like sex and like things like that get, maligned in religion sometimes. And we agree that that's basically a good thing. And we move away from that as a negative. And we start to think about, well, what do we really think that's, not good? Like being cruel to another person, that kind of thing. It's like, well, we have to have some kind of way to assess ourselves and say, like, that wasn't great, I apologize. That doesn't, that's not a negative thing. And it also depends like who we're confessing to. Like, again, I think having it be some, I don't think it has to be a priest, obviously, in a church, but I think that just that idea, and that's a tradition that can be found in lots of different ways in lots of different religions and cultures around the world. Confession does have that very specific Catholic connotation, but in the larger sense, even in secular, I mean, that's part of our judicial system is confession, right? We value that, like, if we put a value on the idea that if you did something really bad, but you say, I did something really bad, that was awful, that's better than saying, nope, I didn't do anything wrong, And I think that you can find that in a lot of different systems.
Right. Thank you. Because I know I hit you with the hard ones.
No,
in your
please,
book.
I love this. This is great.
But the astronomy piece of it, if we could talk about time.
Yes.
The daily, the weekly, the monthly rituals, the seasons, and I'll let you know my daily ritual is scrolling through Twitter.
Of course.
To see if Betty White is trending.
Oh, God. Oh, no. That's not funny.
Yeah, no. And
oh, my God. You just have to wait for the Denzel meme.
Yes, the Denzel
that's like the relief. I'm
yes.
like, what if, I don't want to go off on a tangent.
Oh, I know.
Like, what if something happens to Denzel? Do we use a different meme? What do we do? Sorry.
It's not hilarious. Then we would have Betty White memes going.
Yeah.
Denzel. This is so dark. This went dark.
Okay. I'm sorry.
And I didn't mean to.
No.
I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I'm doom scrolling. I'm screaming at my TV. What I'm saying is there's room for improvement in my daily rituals. So what do you think are some cool daily rituals for secular folks? Like what are we overlooking? What could we be doing?
Well, this is the thing, is that there are so many things that like technically fall into the category of rituals that we just don't even see that way because it's not part of our like lexicon usually as secular people. So like, I mean, I write about in the book, like, making coffee in the morning. My husband is the early bird. He makes coffee. He brings it to me. And like this little thing, I mean, it's amazing. I know I sound like I just like landed on this planet, that I'm so impressed that like plants grow in the earth and stuff. But like coffee, I mean, it's amazing. It grows in the earth. You like heat it up and crush it up and put hot water through it. And then it makes you go. Like it makes you run and like do everything you need to do. When you wake up, when you open your eyes and you're like, I can't do anything, I'm not, I want to stay in bed. And I just think like that kind of thing, this idea of a ritual is in the like traditional sense, the person and the anthropologist who like invented the idea of a rite of passage. You know, it's this, like, it's a portal, right? Something is the way it is, and then you go through a ceremony or a ritual or a rite of passage, and it's different. It's a threshold, you know? And it's like, when we feel like we haven't really started our day until we have a cup of coffee, that is the threshold into the day. And so there's so many things like that. A glass of wine in the evening, I think, is a similar thing.
Yes.
Especially these days where it's like this transition, like the work day is done, or, you know, dinner is done, and now you're going to a different part of your evening. And I think what's so interesting is, especially recently, especially in, you know, the pandemic, I think yoga and like mindfulness meditation, which come from religious traditions, you know, have taken on this, I mean, they already had, but they have taken on this enormous secular life of their own, where people, you know, even if it's like a YouTube video, especially when, like, you know, and I guess depends where you live, what's going on, but like, you know, when we were on just like total lockdown, it was like a yoga video was like a really, like, that was like almost like being like in a group of people, you know? And I think that there's like so much there that we do that is beautiful in that way, and that's really valuable, and that is a ritual. And I mean, in terms of like the astronomical element of it, it's so easy to forget that it's the rotation of the earth on its axis. Like, that is so, it's so easy to not have that mindset of what a day is. But when you see a sunset or you see the sunrise, I mean, if you're that kind of person who gets up,
I actually am. I'm a sunset person.
I was going to say sunrise. I was like, if you're that, but no, sunset, right. Of course. Yeah.
For sure.
But if you're like experiencing that moment, that transition from day to night or night to day, it's like, that's a really vivid, visceral way to experience the astronomical element of time passing. And I think that is so much of what ritual is about, is experiencing change, experiencing time pass. And especially right now, where the days have like blend together in such a...
It's Blur's Day.
Yes.
Like, what's happening?
Exactly. And so the more that we have this little rhythm, you know, I think it's helpful, and it's based in something totally real, totally tangible, totally scientific. Yes. It's just a matter of reminding ourselves, I think.
And I realize I've been a bit remiss. I want to take a little bit of a step back to make sure that we're defining, or are you defining differently, ritual versus habit?
Yes. So that's a really good question. I think that a ritual is something that you do for that experience of that transition, of that experience of feeling like you're going from one idea to another, or you're going from, you know, one state of mind to another, and, you know, just mentally, not in a, like, obviously not in a supernatural way, but I think a habit is something that it's like the difference between, like, if you drive home from work, just the most straightforward, convenient way, because that's the easiest, like, way to get home. Let's say that's the least traffic, that's a habit. If you take like a special little bridge to go home that's a couple minutes out of the way, but when you walk over the bridge, you say, okay, I'm going to leave whatever happened at work, and now it's my evening and it's my time. Something like that, for example, is that to me would be the difference between a ritual and a habit.
So there's intentionality in there.
Yes.
You just reminded me, I had a childhood friend whose father used to walk in the neighborhood, and he never took the same route twice. He always intentionally just wanted to, you know, find a different way and explore. Like, that was his, you know, the way he opened up and enjoyed life, and, you know, explored something new every time. Yeah.
And just for clarity, like, it's not like obviously like not from like a superstitious point of view that you think like if you don't do this or you do, but it's just this idea of like, this is something that you can sort of, I think, just like, you know, process some kind of change, experience some kind of change. And I think that that's something that's so difficult sometimes. And I think that's why we have so many of the rituals that we have. I mean, especially coming of age rituals. It's like, someone is a kid and then all of a sudden they're an adult. Like, this is mind-blowing. Like, especially like if
Yeah.
you have like a friend who has like a little kid and you don't see them for a few years and they're like a teenager and you're like, this is unacceptable. How did this happen so quickly? And so I think it's like some stuff like that, where it's the whole community is involved in a coming of age ritual or a wedding or something like that. It's like we're all going through this kind of change together, even though it's focused on one person or two people.
You spend a goodly amount of time on that chapter in the book, because there's births, there's coming of age, and there were quite a few rich coming of age rituals. I will say I didn't really have one. It's like
Yeah.
I got the book.
Yeah.
And things were explained, and I really didn't like the explanation. I'm like, this is what's gonna happen. I don't like it. I still don't like it.
No.
But you've really found some beautiful things. Are there one or two that were your favorites, like one for boys, one for girls?
Oh, yeah. The one that I think is my favorite, and it is for boys, is in Vanuatu in the South Pacific, small island about 1,000 miles off the coast of Australia. There is something called land diving, and so men do it like regularly, but when you go from boyhood to manhood, in this context, you do it for the first time. It's your coming of age ritual. And there's so like in the trees, there's like these platforms built, and young men climb to the top. They greet their community from the top. Everyone is excited, and they tie pliable vines to their ankles and they jump off. And it's called land diving, and it's like a bungee cord. To me, that is like a perfect performance art piece about what it is to grow up, right? It's like you jump off into the great unknown, and like all of a sudden, all the things that are sort of protecting you go away. The vine protects you, but in the experience of jumping off, it's like it's taking this leap into the unknown. And to me, like saying something is like a performance art piece almost has like a critical connotation, but to me that's what the best rituals are. It's this like a wedding, right? This is like a play we put on. We have costumes, we have a script, we have a set, we have a rehearsal, right? We call it a rehearsal dinner.
Action.
Right? Exactly. And it's like, you have like a wedding planner is like a director, you know what I mean? We put so much into this, and we have these lines and an audience, and I think that there's something about that that's so beautiful, because it's like this art form that explains what's happening, of two people have decided they want to spend the rest of their lives together because they love each other. And like, I think that there's something so beautiful about thinking of it as an art form to explain something that's going on. And for me, the land diving in Vanuatu, I don't know, that is adolescence to me. It's just jumping off a giant tower in front of everyone.
So you're leaping from your adolescence into adulthood.
Yeah.
Am I remembering this correctly? Is that the same ritual where their moms
yes,
take their
and
favorite toy?
Yes, yeah, like their childhood like object, and then that is as part of it. Your mother destroys your your like
not
blankie
my
or whatever.
binky.
No, but it's like, yes, you're absolutely right. I left that part out. That is like that is just very poetic of what it's like. And I think that when we sort of are so removed, there's things like that, and all over the world there's so many, and then we have like bat mitzvahs and quinceañeras and like Super Sweet 16. Remember that show? And like,
I wasn't on it.
No, but it's like that. I think that like, it's so easy to be like, these things are so different. But when we just peel back all the sort of specifics of what we're doing and look at it as this is a biological change that's happening to a member of our species that's going from childhood through pubescence, and like there's a lot of different elements of that, and yeah, it doesn't happen on one day, and everybody's a little bit different, but this idea that like this is because the society will go on a little longer if children reach adulthood and can reproduce, and it's like the hope of a future for the group, and that's it's beautiful. And it's totally, to me, it's just, barely underneath the surface. It's just about science.
Right. It's science and beauty, and there's no religious mystery but it doesn't make it any less amazing.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it's wondrous that that happens, you know, that kids grow up and they become adults. I can't believe it.
I still can't believe I did it. Like, this was not my idea at all. I was very happy as a child. Adulthood is taking a little bit of a toll here.
Yeah.
But I have a big question for
Yes.
you. Because as we sort of settle into adulthood, you know, it seems like the fun life ceremonies kind of drop off, right? Like we have coming of age and then death. Like that's what it feels like. Like we have a sweet 16, but no savvy 70.
Oh, that's a good one. I
I
like
know,
that
right?
idea.
I hope if I get that far. But, you know, I mean, I know birthdays kind of do it, but I most of my friends are like, I'm not celebrating my birthday because they're depressed by it. They're not.
And also,
not
at a certain point, if it's not a multiple of 5, people get
right,
which is
5
also just
or
because we
10.
have 5 digits on our hand that we think that's such an important multiple. You know, 5.
Right.
It's totally arbitrary. Sorry, side note.
No. But I guess my question is, you know, because it seems like we don't have any sort of ceremony to look forward to after a certain time. And is this why getting older feels so, ugh, you know, and what can we do about it? Is this where we get to make up our own ceremonies?
I fully believe in making up your own ceremonies. I'm a big proponent of that. I think whatever is, you know, representative of your philosophy, that's what you should celebrate. But I think that it's not that things slow down because we don't have as many celebrations. We don't have as many celebrations because things slow down, you know, and like change. It's about change. And at a certain point in your life, there's just not as many changes as often. But someone in my life who I adore suggested that when women reach menopause, there should be a party that's like, thank you for your service. like, thank you. Like, that was, you went through a lot of years of, you know, like discomfort, and, you know, it's kind of annoying, and now you're done with that, and so here's like a brunch or something. But I just thought that was so like adorable and clever, but it's so true, because it's just as much of a I mean, it was, you know, it used to be called the change, you know, and
right.
I think that it's just, you know, because the society and the species values like making more members of the species so much, it's not as big a deal as like the coming of age, the other side of that experience. But I think that, yeah, I mean, I really do believe in, like, you know, finding things to celebrate. I mean, if that speaks to you, it doesn't, I think people object sometimes to the idea of it being mandatory. And I think like anything, can't be forced. And like any, you know, any kind of celebration, and that's when, you know, or ritual, that's when people feel obliged, is I think when it becomes a problem. But I think if you're into it and you like that kind of thing, I think there's no shortage of wonderful things to celebrate. And you know, the anniversary of anything is, again, this is an astronomical event. We are in the same place in relationship to the sun. I mean, the solar system is moving, so we're not in the exact same place, but we are in the same place in relationship to the sun as we were when, you know, we were born or got married or whatever the, you know, annual remembrance of something that happened is. And so, I don't know, I think that there's a whole host of things that can be celebrated that way.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because when I remember I got to the chapter on death, I skipped the chapter on sex because, again, I was raised Catholic, so I was very uncomfortable.
When I inscribed it to my mother-in-law, I was like, you might want to skip chapter 11. Like, sorry.
but death is huge.
Yeah.
Because, again, it's inescapable. And yet, I mean, I don't know where this was in the chapter, but you said every loss you withstand in your life reopens all the others. Every goodbye is every goodbye.
Yeah.
And yet we're not doing it well as a society at large. And then it gets even more awkward if you're secular, because no one's going to say the right thing to you. They're always going to say it wrong. And it's like, I don't know what's worse. Somebody died, or somebody's going to try to console you with something you don't want to hear.
Right.
But you I just want to throw this in here, and then I'll let you go, because you had something so beautiful that I didn't hear of before. But it's the Yiddish word for the death day, Yartzeit. Am I getting
Yahrzeit.
that
Yeah,
right?
Yahrzeit. Yeah. Yeah. So, and I talk about this a lot in the book. So my ancestors, all my, like when I take a DNA test, it's like, you are an Ashkenazi Jew, like 100%. I mean, they have to say like 99.999%, but like, I'm like, I know.
You're in.
And right. I'm like, I get it. I know I'm nervous and bad at sports. I know. And so, but I think that like, you know, so I am always trying to find ways that even though I don't subscribe obviously to the theology of my ancestors, I do want to honor them in ways and you know that don't make me feel like I'm going through the motions of something that doesn't speak to me. But you know, after a certain time horizon, after like my great grandparents, I don't know anyone's names. I don't know what villages they came from. Literally all I know is that they were Jews, probably in Eastern Europe. And so when I light a candle on the anniversary of the death of someone I loved, it's this special candle that burns for 24 hours, and it's very dangerous. It should be illegal. I mean, it's no, it comes in a tin thing, and you sort of put it in the sink when you go to sleep so it doesn't get knocked over or something. But I feel connected to them because I know that they did something similar to this, or like when we have, you know, a secular version of Hanukkah or something like that. I feel this connection to the people whose DNA I carry by doing these things that I can do in a way that doesn't feel like I'm obliged, but it's almost like I can imagine people thousands of years ago who I have some part of them in me doing this. And so that is something that I think is really powerful. And for me, the Yahrzeit candle, you know, when someone dies and you lose someone you love in your life, the first week or two, everyone is very eager to help and be present and bring you food. And then it kind of dissipates, of course, because people go back to their lives and that's normal. But when the shock starts to wear off of the loss and it becomes real, even if it's a loss that was, you know, not sudden, and it becomes real. Matter, yeah, exactly. That's sort of when you kind of need the language to talk about this stuff. And, you know, this tradition, why it speaks to me is this idea that even years later, even many years later, some part of you can still be in mourning, you know? And it's like that feeling of connecting back through time to the person you lost and to the idea of just generations of people who have experienced this in one way or another. I mean, for most of history, people experienced it a lot more, you know, and, you know, life expectancy was younger, you know, shorter, and like, this is part of the human experience, and it's painful and it's horrible. But I think having language around it and having traditions around it, and I think that the part of the problem is it's the most taboo subject, death. And I think especially, you know, if you don't think that there's anything else, or that your loved one is watching over you, or that they're in a better place, or all this language that you get sometimes when someone doesn't, let's say, know that you're secular and wants to make you feel better. I think I think we got to get more comfortable with just talking about the idea of mortality, and that it's because life is not forever that this is so special that we're here right now. If we were immortal, if this went on forever, it would be nothing, you know? But it's because it's short. That's so fantastic that we're here.
Yeah, I love that. You just put me in mind of a song. I don't remember the group, but it's the title is "If We Were Vampires."
And someone else mentioned that to me. I have to listen to it.
And essentially, it means that if we lived forever, we wouldn't love as well.
Yeah,
we take it all for granted. But I don't remember which chapter this was from, but you actually said, like, instead of putting death, out of our mind, instead of ignoring our fears, let's honor them. Let's talk about them and take pleasure in the light of a little longer before it's gone.
Yeah.
And please share with everybody, you took a trip in college, was it, to Italy?
Yes.
which, you know, jealous.
I know, it's even more amazing than that. I don't want to brag, but it was my semester abroad. So I was like there for like 4 months, and it was amazing. I mean, really transformative time. And in Rome, it doesn't matter, but it was in Florence, but you know, day trip to Rome with my friends. And there's this place called the Crypt of the Capuchin monks. And
I'm sorry, the Crypt of the Cappuccino? What?
yeah, the Crypt of the Cappuccino. It's wonderful. And it's, no, you have to get a biscotti. No, the Crypt, sorry, that's so horrible. No, the Crypt of the Capuchin monks. So a sect of Catholic brothers, monks. And it's a tiny museum. And it is like, I don't know, 5 rooms that, you know, high ceilings, but not large. And from floor to ceiling, it is completely intricately decorated with human skeletal remains. And this sect of monks, their ritual was when one of them died, they would bury them and they would wait and wait and wait. And when they had decomposed, they would take the bones. And so like rooms of fibia and like rooms of like clavicles, I don't know, you know. And then in the last room, there was this little sign in like 8 or 10 languages that said, "We were once what you are now. You will someday be what we are now." And as a secular person in a very Catholic setting, to have this deep philosophical like experience, revelation, that was so, to me, I mean, it was like, it's very easy to see it through a lens of it being like extremely morbid. And there is an element of that, but there is something else, which is like, we are all walking around with these hearts, these bones inside of us. And, you know, we're talking, we're walking, we're having these feelings and thoughts every day. And some point it goes away. And it's just it's just mind blowing that that's how it works. And to, I think, come face to face with that idea and really think about it instead of just putting it out of our minds. I think it is easier when you do lose someone to just not be less sad or be less emotional, but just to understand that this is part of it. And, you know, come to a place of just, you know, reckoning with the reality of it rather than putting this extremely uncomfortable, scary idea out of our heads. And, you know, easier said than done. But there was something about that little museum in Rome that just, right, it's not that it was a new idea. It was that they presented it in such a vivid way that it really got through to me. I mean, I was like 19, and I had already lost my dad, but still there was something about seeing that that just was just stayed with me. It really did.
I read that, and you know, now it's with me, and it was humbling and yet inspiring. It's like that reminder, like to me that's the real biological clock that's ticking.
Right.
You know, we're on the clock, everybody. And at some point, you know, we all don't get the clock out on our own.
Right.
Sometimes we're here and then we're not. And what value are we putting on that? And what are we doing? How are we, and how are we passing that time? Are we actually investing our time, or are we just wasting time? You know.
Right. And also, if this isn't, like, for those of us who don't believe that this is the dress rehearsal and who don't believe that there is a grand, you know, plan, for those of us who don't believe that like the bad guys are going to get their comeuppance and the good guys are going to get their reward, what are we doing to like try to make things more fair and more just and closer? You know, there's almost more of an impetus. I write in the book, the thing that I admire most about organized religion is the social pressure to do good works. And they're not always great, but when it's like feeding people, and you know, sometimes there's a catch, and I'm not saying it's perfect, but the idea that there is a social pressure to try to make things better in some situations, that's what I think as secular people we could benefit from so much, is this idea that, because in a way there's a bigger argument to do that if you're secular, because if everything is not going to be fair in the end, we have to try to make the world a little bit more fair. And so it also solves the other problem of like creating a community and having people, if you volunteer somewhere once a week or once a month or whatever it is, or you organize, or you're doing something active politically, it also gives you a little group of people who have similar outlook as you, and that's something that can be hard when you're secular to not have, your congregation.
We create community in different ways.
Yeah.
And it definitely has to be more intentional and mindful. You're just not sort of born into it. But I think that's what makes it more valuable, because you choose it and you build it. Sasha, we have a lot of questions for you.
Yay.
Yes, absolutely. Yay. I mean, we have 655 participants, but not all of them are asking questions.
Don't be shy, guys.
No. And my folks know that, they have their, they go down to the little Q&A box and type their question in the form of a question. You guys know how I do. But let me see if I can get some of these answered. I think we talked about this. Someone said, and this is a little bit of a statement. No, that's not it. Wow, I'm not sure if you copied and pasted this one correct, Mark, but I'll paraphrase it. There's someone who they're working, but they want to their holidays aren't traditional. They want to take time off for like the equinox and the solstice, and like how can they legally do that and then not do it as personal days? Like, how can they get their employer to acknowledge
That's a great question. I'm not a lawyer. I should say that loudly and to begin with. But I wonder if I don't know how it works if you're a member of maybe you can align yourself with some existing like pagan or Wiccan belief system and say, I'm just like a very reformed member of this group. I don't know what the right answer is, but I love the idea of solstices and equinoxes as holidays. And actually, you could make the argument that really all the like monotheistic holidays are based on the solstices and equinoxes. So you're just some more traditional route. I don't know. And maybe that would be a way to approach it, at least for the winter solstice and the spring equinox. You could maybe make that argument.
We have another question. And I love these. They are so heartfelt. People are so trying to reach across the aisle, I think. How can I connect with family members during rituals that they think celebrate? And how can I talk to them when they believe that 2020 is a sign of the end times?
Yeah.
First of all, it is.
Well, that's just, yeah. No, I think that, this is such a good question of like, so many people, on some level, because I was raised secular, I never had to like deal with this question of like, when you have not revelation, but like when you realize that this isn't for you and you're raised in a religious household and you go out on your own, how do you still connect with your family that has a totally different perspective? And on some level, I haven't had that experience, so I don't know, but I was just talking to this woman who is a humanist and a cognitive scientist at Yale, Laurie Santos, and she was talking about in the political climate of like sort of reaching across the aisle, that if you start by asking questions and start by saying, how did you come to this perspective? Or like, what makes you, feel that this is what's, going to happen? Or like, and you sort of let the other person tell their story, even if it's a family member, even if it's someone who you think, how they got to where they are. And then maybe they may be more open to hearing how you got to your perspective. I don't know if that's helpful. I think it depends on the personality of the person a lot, but I also think it's worth a try, maybe.
Yeah, well, clearly they're asking the question because they're willing.
Yeah.
On some level.
Yeah.
Steve Lundquist, he says, caveat, I have not read the book, for which I will say, for small creatures such as we, available wherever you get books.
Yes, support your local bookstores.
Yes. Christmas is coming, or whatever.
Winter solstice, Hanukkah, anything, all of the above.
All of it's coming. All of it's coming.
New Year's Eve.
Right. Oh, exactly. So he says, forgive me if this is covered in there. Do you feel that using a charged word like ritual could end up devolving the intent of this sense of wonder into a strict coda that goes against an evidence-based worldview?
That's a really good question, and I don't cover it in the book. It's funny. There's so much around language that I really struggled with when I was writing this, and when talking about words like spiritual and even magical, you know, have a theistic root. And yeah, I mean, in general, and I hope this comes across in the book, you know, my perspective is, you know, the only orthodoxy should be for like the scientific method, and like there's no other, you know, everything else just has to fit with the person's needs and wants and desires for what is working for them. But the language around like these sorts of things, you know, it's a language that came to be in a monotheistic society, and so we have to take what we have and hope that by explaining, changing, you know, our practices and explaining ourselves with some nuance that the words may evolve, as they tend to do, into something else that's more broad and more open.
Thank you for that. I remember doing an episode of Point of Inquiry with Anthony Penn, and he's said this in many interviews. We shouldn't let other people just wholesale own words.
Yeah.
You know, these words belong to everybody, and using them thoughtfully is, you know, we get to use them too, is what I'm saying. Let's see. JJ said, thank you, Sasha. Can you please speak to the psychedelic experience and its implication for science in the secular worldview? What? So we all get high and appreciate life? Is that your question, JJ?
Yeah, I mean, and for that, no, I definitely talk about, actually in the coming of age chapter, I do talk about taking mushrooms, and the idea that, I mean, a vision quest, that is in many cultures, that is a very traditional, I mean, what happened, my mushroom story was not like, it was an impromptu freak out. A vision quest is a very traditional, ritualized coming of age thing in many cultures. But yeah, I mean, I think that there is a place for that. I don't know how much more detail, but yes, I think that, I mean, it's amazing that our brains have receptors for those kinds of plants. And, you know, I think there was a responsible grown-up way to use them for gaining wonder.
I have a question here that, you know, I kind of asked you already, but they have an interesting twist on it. They ask, is there a difference between habits like making coffee and rituals? And you did talk about that, the intentionality of it. But do you think human biology programs certain rituals into us? And they said, like wanting a funeral for a loved one.
Oh, it's so interesting.
I don't know if that's biology or culture. That is interesting, which is why I wanted to ask you that.
It's a really good question.
Thank you, Lawrence.
It's a really good question. In terms of like, I mean, as you mentioned, one of the chapters is about sex, and I do present that as a kind of ritual in a way, and that's a biological event. And in terms of a funeral, I mean, it's so interesting because, you know, there's an anthropological perspective that once we started burying our dead, that's sort of when we transitioned into humans, and like, there are other non-human species, non-Homo sapien species of humans that did similar things. But I think that there's just that death, more than anything else, it calls out for something. But right, there are other species that have deep emotional bonds, other mammals who have deep emotional bonds between parents and children, for example, that don't have the kind of elaborate events that we do, and they don't have the ritual around it. So I don't know where the line is, but there is something that I mean, it may be cultural, it may be biological, but it does seem like it is an immense, overpowering urge to mark that somehow in a way that at least gives us a sense of understanding around something that's so hard to understand.
I'm not sure this is a question, but I like the combination because the bookends of your book, you open with birth and you end with death. That's kind of how it works, and then all the fun in between. But Paulo said thoughts about birth as a ritual and approaching death in a ritual way, which puts me in mind. I think it's called the Swedish death cleaning, where they actually start, there's very much alive, but the end is near, and they start actually decluttering, which and giving, like, if I want you to have this pen, I want you to have this pen right now. I can actually hand it to you and give it to you.
Oh, wow. It's like a Marie Kondo.
Yes, free Marie Kondo.
Yes.
Right. As opposed to what my parents did, and I have everything I have to clean myself.
Oh,
and I don't know if that's what Paula meant, but is there some sort of approaching death ritual? And not that it's necessarily next week, but hey, you guys, clock's ticking.
Right. Well, I think that, that's one of the things that the more we talk about it and the more that we accept that it is eventual, maybe we would have more of that in our culture. The thing that I've recently become aware of that sort of falls into that is the idea of, like, and connecting to birth, the idea of a death doula. And in some cases in a very secular, humanistic way, but somebody who helps you through it. And, like, it's kind of, I guess, a less, right, there are elements of, like, hospice when someone's very ill for a long time that are have elements of that where it is a one-way street. But the idea of it, that's more from a physical standpoint and, like, physical comfort rather than an emotional standpoint. And I think this Alua Arthur is one person I'm aware of who is a death doula, and, like, this idea of, like, someone to help you into this with some understanding and some emotional support, not just, let's say, like, medical support. And I
love that.
Yeah, I think it makes sense in a lot of ways. And it just, the idea of doula as the word, it just
somebody who helps you in and somebody who helps you out.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, I really not that I'm in a hurry.
No, but just the idea that
it also sort of helps the family, because these are people who love you and they don't want to see you go and they don't want to lose you and they don't even want to talk about it. Most people don't even want to talk about it.
Right.
So to sort of help be that mediator and that bridge and help. I'm loving everything about this. I need a doula.
Yeah, just a life doula. How about in the in-betweens? That's just that's like a life coach or something. Like, who helps you through the medium part in between the extremes.
We're almost coming up on the end here, but there's so many questions, so many interesting ones. And by the way, lots of tributes to your dad in here. I'm not reading all of them because we would need another hour. And folks, I want you to let you know I see them. I'm not ignoring them. Please
share them with me. And thank you to, truly the people who, and I'm so lucky because so many people reach out to me to say how much they love my dad and his work. My parents work together, and I'm so grateful. Let me say thank you to everyone who expresses that.
There are tons, and I can't read them all, but you should know that you and your family are loved and admired, and your dad and your mom made a big impact on people, and that's totally in here. But this is your hour. I have a very interesting question from Joe Montejunas. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right. He wants to know, what is a unique woman's ritual? I'm going to say complaining.
No. No, that is not good.
No, that's just me. That's my unique ritual.
So in Judaism and more conservative or Orthodox Judaism, the mikveh is a monthly bath that you take after your period has ended, before you resume sexual relations. And it's like a renewal. The idea is that you renew, and it's so, I write about this in the book, and this idea of, like, the moon phases and the female body being on a similar time schedule, but there's no actual evidence at this point that there is a connection between the phases of the moon and the menstrual cycle. But we have so many poetic connections in art and mythology, so many moon goddesses. Anyways, but there are, I mean, that is one thing that, and in some cultures it's not a bath and it's kind of oppressive, and in some cases really dangerous. Like if there's you have to go to a separate hut that's not safe. And, there are extremes that are not positive, but I think there are some special things that women get to do that I think, it's beautiful. It's part of our biology. And again, it's something that sometimes we don't want to talk about. We don't want to think about, but it's okay. It's okay to talk about.
Yeah, no, thank you. So, you guys, I'm loving everything that's here in the chat, but we are at 8 o'clock on the dot. We can go a few minutes past.
Yeah.
Sasha, you still okay?
Yeah, totally.
Okay. Your kid's still asleep.
Yeah, my husband took her to sit outside at a restaurant, so she'll be fine. They're having a date.
Nice,
They're having the best time. Yeah.
It's happy hour.
Yeah,
she ordered a little Shirley
Yeah,
Temple.
no, oh my God, the sugar she would be up all night. No. No
same.
grenadine. That's where I draw the line.
Not yet. Let's wait till first grade. Let's wait till first grade.
Yeah.
I think this is an interesting question, especially considering what's coming up in a couple of weeks. Omar wants to know, how would one celebrate the freedom of being secular and away from your parents' faith?
Oh, wow. Well, that's talking about Independence Days. And I write a little bit about this in the book and when I used to volunteer at an after school program. I won't get into the whole story, but I encountered somebody who was a member of a very, closed, devout religious sect. And he wanted out, and he was an adolescent, but he just was I don't believe in this and I got to get out of here. And it's the story in the book, but I think that is a kind of Independence Day. And the day that you walk out and say, I'm doing my own thing, or you announce, or whatever it is, or you break some tradition, you do something you're not supposed to do, that day, I think that's a kind of Independence Day. And I think that's worthy of celebration as much as anything else, because that takes a lot of courage. And as I write about my grandfather who made that transition himself, and when he went to go tell his very Orthodox father that he wasn't going to abide by the rules anymore of his faith, his father said, the only sin would be to pretend. And I really believe that in either direction. You can't fake it. So good for you for breaking out. And I think that is an Independence Day as much as any other.
I like this question, and Leon, if you haven't gotten the book already, I really suggest you do. He says, to exist, an organism consumes time. How to ritualize this condition?
Well, I think it's so much about time. I think that's absolutely right. And I think that, the passage of time, that's anything that is changing of the seasons. All of this is about time passing. It's astonishing. It's so hard. It's like trying to feel the earth move. If you never see a sunrise or a sunset, you can't tell it's moving, right? If you don't mark days sometimes, somehow, or mark seasons changing, or just have an awareness of them, it's like you turn around and you're 90 years old, And I think that it's that awareness it's so hard to do, and the days blend together and you think, was that a month ago or was that a year ago, especially now? But I think having that awareness of time passing is really valuable. And I think every ritual is a way of marking that.
Thank you so much for that. And I want to squeeze in one more, because I think this goes back to the beginning, and really addresses, the community that I believe is watching. It's Chauncey Williams. Thank you, Chauncey. You say in the book, you talk about the monthly community of women that you've established in your life. Do you have advice for how a secular community should start and get buy-in for secular rituals that provide lasting meaning?
It's such a good question. I would say, trial and error. Sometimes it's not going to always stick and you can't force it. And I think just creating something that people feel good when they leave and they don't feel obliged and they want to go and it's joyful. I think that's what's really so valuable. And there is a sense of community, and sometimes somebody has to be the ringleader and it's, a big logistical pain in the tush and like you have to send emails and you have to do all that stuff. But once you can sort of get that rolling in a way where the people who are involved are enthusiastic about it, and once a month is so, now no one can do anything, but in the before times, and I hope in the future, when, once a month is just like, when you think about it, it's like only 12 times a year. It's not this huge commitment. And it's like, if you don't pressure people to come, you just invite them. And sometimes it's going to be 2 or 3 people. Sometimes maybe it'll be 5 or 6, but you create a space that fills something, some intellectual, emotional desire that people have for togetherness. I think it's really, it's something that more people want than maybe are willing to organize.
That I know we have to go, but that puts me in mind of the Day of the Dead.
Yes.
Event that Margaret is always, she wanted me to do it this year, but I'm like, no, I'm not ready. I'm not ready. Just where people are gathering and honoring their past loved ones. You're involved in that.
Yes.
You're shooting a video for that. But yeah, she's a great example of someone who keeps having events and keeps inviting people. And I can't make this, but I can make that. You keep creating opportunities for community, and maybe it's just pizza.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just wine.
Yeah, absolutely. Movie night. Totally.
And I think the key word that you said is joyful. If it feels like drudgery,
right,
why would anybody want to do it?
Right. And don't pressure people to come. I think that's something I struggled with a lot, where I would just be like, are you coming? It's tonight? Are you going to be there? Like in the beginning. And then I just thought, once people don't feel like you're twisting their arm, they want to come a lot more.
Right. Yeah, that is sage advice for gatherings and dating. They don't like the arm twisting. But thank you, Sasha, so much. And once again, her book, For Small Creatures Such as We, Rituals for Finding Meaning in Our Unlikely World. We really just touched the surface today. And I think if you get the book, you will find that she gives wonderful examples for extracting, wonderful ways to mark the passage of time without the religious baggage. And you will be pleasantly surprised on how you can start integrating these things into your life as well. And a reminder to everyone, if you've missed any of this or you want to go back and catch something, this talk has been recorded and will be available tomorrow on skepticalinquirer.org. And the next talk in this series, believe it or not, you guys, is November. It's November 5th. It's gonna, I'm gonna miss you. I'm used to seeing you every 2 weeks. But John Petrocelli will be talking about persuasive bullshitters and the insidious bullshit hypothesis. How do we only have an hour for this? I don't understand. But a big thank you, as always, to Skeptical Inquirer and the tech team comprised of the amazing Mark. I am your host, Leanne Lord, and I look forward to seeing most of you again on November 5th. And one more time, a big thank you, Sasha. I really, as you can see, I got so much out of this.
Thank you so much.
That I've read and will incorporate, and I recommend others do it as well. But everyone, all of you, thank you for coming, and have a great night.
Thank you, everyone.